I just want to say thank you to Engineers PEI for sponsoring this event with us. They're always a great supporter of our program when it comes to Expo and scholarship and events like these to help with our students. So moving on, tonight's agenda will include a welcome and introduction, which is now, but we'll start with the president of Engineers PEI, Colin McQuillan, just with a introduction from them. Then we'll be moving on to hear from three engineers and their journeys. So I just want everyone to remember, this isn't a technical presentation. It's not super formal. This is more of an opportunity to see what life is like as an engineer in three different streams. I also will ask that you please hold any of your questions until the end of all the presentations. There'll be a Q&A session with plenty of time to ask your questions, either to one of the engineers in particular or the panel as a whole. Yeah, thank you. So when we get to that, you'll be able to put them either in the chat or raise your hand and speak on your mic. So with that, we'll get started with Marianne. She was our contact at Engineers PEI to help plan this event. She sits on the council and is currently an electrical engineer at Maritime Electric. So Marianne, I'll hand it over to you. Or sorry.
To Colin.
Colin. I have my notes mixed up. Colin, I'll hand it over to you. They're the presidents of Engineers PEI. So I'll stop sharing my screen and you can take over.
No problem. Thank you, Barry. So hi, everyone. I'm Colin McQuillan. I'm the current president of Engineers PEI. Just gonna give you a short overview of the association and kind of the roles and responsibilities of what we do. I do have to leave after this, so if you do want to ask any questions to me, you can. I might take a minute or two before waiting to the end, if that's okay with everyone. Just one second. So Engineers PEI, the big thing that we always say is that we're a self-regulating profession. And basically what that means is that we provide for our own government of membership, discipline, and honor of people practicing professional engineering within the province of PEI. We're regulated by the Engineering Professional Act along with their bylaws. We were established in 1955 and currently have over 902 professional members and EITs. We have two staff, Jim Landergan, our executive director, and Kim Levesque. Our primary objectives this year, so we have, we're made up Engineers PEI Council. There's 5 counselors along with president, past president, vice president, and our executive director. And we also have a liaison with Engineers Canada, Jeff Connolly, and I believe the Dean of Engineering as well sits on our council for UPI liaison, Wayne Peters. So the main objectives of Engineers PEI is basically to regulate the practice of engineering and govern the profession in accordance with the Act. It's to promote and improve proficiency of professional engineers in all matters relating to engineering and assure the general public of our proficiency and competency. To develop, establish, and maintain standards, professional ethics of the profession, and to promote public awareness of the role of the association. We do all things that matters that may be necessary or incidental and conducive to the welfare of professional engineering. And this is found right in our act. There are kind of our 6 main pillars of what the Engineers PEI Act is built on, and it's all basically focused for public interest and safety. That's what it's based around. So the main role or duty of Engineers PEI is the administration of the Act, and this basically consists of examinations, application reviews, enforcement, and discipline. So we receive applications for EITs, new licenses for professionals, as well as certificates of authorizations for companies as well. So we manage and control those members. And that's kind of the key function of Engineers PEI for protection of public interest. Also, through that management too, we're also required for enforcement of the act and discipline if people don't follow it. So why register with us or become a professional engineer? Well, being a licensed engineer is required by law if you are going to practice engineering or call yourself an engineer in Canada. You can register as an E.I.T, and basically it's a limited scope of work that you're allowed to proceed with. Basically, you can do all the work under the supervision of a professional engineer. It demonstrates the highest standard proficiency in the field, and it's a sign of assurance and quality to basically the public, employers, and clients. In Canada, there's a free trade agreement that states engineers licenses in one province or territory. It's basically there's easier to transfer from province to province. Most of the provinces recognize other jurisdictions and reach out for recommendations on people who are professional members in other provinces. It's easier to transfer if you're part of one to the next. It's important for labor mobility. Also, quite a few engineers practice in multiple jurisdictions or provinces. There's no one membership for all of Canada. Engineers Canada just kind of helps facilitate all individual organizations. So each province has its own regulatory body similar to Engineers PEI. I'd recommend that everyone sign up to be a member of Engineers PEI. There's also student members as well. E.I.T registration upon graduation, the basic requirements are academic qualifications, so graduating from a school such as UPEI or other CAB accredited program, or demonstration of academic qualifications and or other requirements set out by the Engineering Qualifications Committee. So if you did take engineering at another school outside of Canada, there is a tool, a WES assessment, that can review the school and the qualifications, and then that typically goes to a committee for review of any competencies that need to be checked. Once that's done, you have to continue your professional development. So it's something that all of us engineers continue to do every year. We're required to keep a journal, a logbook of professional development hours, which we then submit to the association each year. You have to be a resident of PEI or move into PEI to become a member, and typically 2 references are supplied as well. And Engineers PEI also do hold interviews with members prior to becoming professional members. And I think that was it from Jim's slides that he prepared. If you've had any questions on Engineers PEI, myself, I graduated from UPEI and went to Dalhousie afterwards and moved back here to Prince Edward Island. I work in general contracting. We do quite a bit of commercial and design build fields, and really do enjoy the profession. We get to work with all different members and quite a few members on the panel here. So it's quite exciting. I think you'll all enjoy it. If anyone has any questions too, you can ask.
Colin, I do. I was on the council a few years back and I saw how much work it is for the president. I'm curious, just personally, what drew you to be part of Engineers PEI? Why are you involved?
I think it's important to give back to your profession, no matter what profession you are. It gives us quite a bit, and it's something that you should be proud of and you want to promote and give back, make it better. So it's a sense of stewardship, basically leaving the place better than when you came, or even better for your future generations, trying to help out. It's kind of how I see it. I think everyone has a responsibility to give back to their profession.
So I see a question in the chat. Someone's asking how could they become a student member of Engineers PEI?
So the easiest way is just to reach out to it's info@EngineersPEI, and I'll send out a link afterwards. It's Kim Levesque. She'd be the administrator of it, and she'll forward it on to the appropriate committees. So I'll get a link sent out afterward. Well, Libby's already on it. Thank you.
Thank you, Colin. And we have one more question. When you say be a resident of PEI, do you mean by just residing in PEI?
Yeah, the way our act's written right now, it has wording that you have to be moving to PEI or a resident of PEI. And it's not specific to that. I'm not 100% sure in the bylaws if it goes deeper into that, but basically it's judged on a person by person basis through the engineering qualifications committee if there is someone that lives in multiple places or resides in different places. So if you were someone like that, I'd submit it to there's an engineering review or experience review board committee as well that people can reach out to. So when you do graduate from UPEI, I'd look up the requirements for professional licensee, and there's a new program. It's an online competency base, so it's not the typical 4 years of logbooks that most of us carried out. But I'd look up the program and make sure that you're following through with it. Periodically, it makes it easier come the end to get your professional designation. And you can reach out to that engineering experience board. And if they don't have any, or you can reach out to anyone at EngineersPEI if you have questions on residence or licensing or E.I.T, any of that.
That's great. Thank you, Colin. And if there's any other questions anyone has, there was a email sent into the chat, info@engineerspei.com. So you can reach out to them. Moving on, as you heard with my little brief introduction of Marianne earlier, she was our contact at Engineers PEI to help set up this event. She sits on the council and is currently an electrical engineer at Maritime Electric. So I'll hand this off to her now. Thank you.
Can you guys see my screen, or is it just a blank screen?
You're good.
Okay. So this is kind of to review my journey of, I guess, an engineer in my career so far. So let's just start this. So I just wanted to start with a little bit of background so you get to know me. So I'm an Islander. I was born and raised in PEI. I grew up in Cornwall with my parents and my 2 brothers. I'm the baby of the family, and I'll also say I'm the favorite of the family, maybe. To give away my age a bit, so I was born in PEI, before PEI had the Confederation Bridge and before Google. So you can see from this upper photo, we're doing a ferry trip as a family, and then the Confederation Bridge is being built. My father is an electrical engineer, and a lot of our family field trips growing up would be accompanying him on tours of substations and hydro stations. We even drove to upstate New York once with him to look at a power plant, and he called it a family vacation. As most of you, I loved math, physics, chemistry, and all the sciences, and knew that I wanted to do something with numbers in university. I definitely knew it was not going to be a doctor or nurse related, as dissecting labs were enough for me to never go do that again. So in biology in grade 12, we had to dissect rats, and that was not for me. I knew I wanted to go off island, and this was before UPEI had the full engineering program. So after I got a tour of the new UPI engineering building, like it was pretty impressive. And I wish that was an option when I was that age. My dad's side of the family is all from Nova Scotia, so I set my sights on St. FX and Antigonish, which is where all my cousins graduated from. So I headed in that direction. I was very indecisive of what I wanted to be when I grew up. It ranged from police officer, nurse, accountant, engineer, teacher, and the list just went on. I couldn't make up my mind. My dad was cleaning up old files a couple months ago and sent me this clip he had saved. Looking back, it was a reminder that I had no clue what I wanted to do. Up until the day before Frosh Week, I was registered in the business program, and the rivalry might have settled down a bit, but you might know that accountants and engineers always chirp on each other and they don't like each other. My father always said to me, engineers don't like accountants. Are you sure you want to go into business? So I registered and switched into the engineering diploma program at St. FX the day before classes started. And then that was a 2-year program. And then I would need to go to Dalhousie to finish my degree. My first year of engineering was very general and intro into all subjects. We even had a drafting course where we had to do all our drafting by hand and change the lead sizes for different lines. So I'm not sure if you guys still do courses like that or if it's all in CAD. So it was pretty cool to use CAD in my career and just see how amazing it is and just the functionality of the tool. We also didn't need to declare a discipline until our second semester of first year. So I remember the first week of school, it was a Friday afternoon. I had my computer programming lab. Once getting back to my dorm room, I started to cry and I called my parents. I'm like, I can't do this. This is too hard. I know nothing about computers. I felt like I was the only kid in the class who didn't build their own computer in high school. And this was just to show that there will be hard subjects and courses that will push you. You'll have to dedicate a lot of time to push forwards. They may not be your interest, and it just takes all the extra push just to get through them, learn it, and then move on to the courses that you really do enjoy. I also didn't enjoy the next 3 languages of programming I had to take in later years, but got through them. I did, however, love our circuit courses. It reminded me of physics in high school, and it just clicked. I liked it. One of the labs, we built an FM radio, and I thought this was the coolest thing ever. So for my first year design project, my group made heated traffic lights. So this was, can be demonstrated here. This was to solve a problem PEI always has. So once they switched to the new LED lights for traffic lights, they aren't hot enough to melt the sticky East Coast snow. So then we added heat sensors and then temperature sensors to not surpass the point of switching to LED, like by the wattage. I wrote out to Ron McKinley, our MLA at the time, and surely enough, he sent me 2 traffic lights for the project. I remember being shocked of how massive they are when they're actually on the ground and not up in the air. So second year started and I had 3 electrical electives like digital logic, circuits 2, and power systems. And there were only 3 out of the 40 students in electrical. So it was safe to say the class sizes were very small. So I tried to find some more pictures from my university days at St. FX, but having a flip phone, most of the pictures I found were very blurry or from a night out. I found there was a lot of volume of schoolwork, having 6 subjects and all having a lab or tutorial. The day was usually jam-packed, so there was many all-nighters, especially for thermofluids exams. That was a tough one. I then finally got my X-ring, which is the real reason people go to St. FX. Then it was time to move to the big city of Halifax and do the next 2 years of my degree. And oddly enough, I had 3 of the same professors my father had, and he thought they were old when he had them. So they were very old when I had them. Like they struggled walking to the chalkboard.
I didn't get that. Could you try again?
My watch talked to me. Okay. During my 3rd and 4th years, the courses became more specialized and the work became more practical and interesting. For the 2nd semester of 3rd year, we had a robotic challenge for our design course. So we had to build a firefighting robot. So it needed to go through an obstacle course and detect heat and light and navigate there purely on the programming and no human controls or interaction. Luckily, my partner was in computer engineering, so I did all the hardware and he did all the software. The night before the competition, Declan told me not to fiddle with it anymore. It works the night before. We don't want to break anything and go into the competition with a messed up robot. So I spent the night before decorating the robot, as you can see here. I was inspired by the Land Before Time. I also did 3 work terms and did all 3 work terms at Asman Kemps and Associates, which was located in Stratford, PEI at the time. The company was much smaller back then, so there was around 30 people. I mostly helped out with build packages, CAD drawings, build materials, soldering. I spent a good chunk of time in inventory in the warehouse, as that's where they seem to be short on with people. And even had a programming assignment in assembly language, which was horrible. It probably took me the full 4 months to do, where they could have got one of their software engineers to do it in like a week. But I did create a programmable dimmer switch to be used on control panels, so the operator wasn't distracted by the red LED being more bright than the green LED. So that's kind of cool. That's out there in the field, and that was one of my inventions. So after what seemed like 4 very long semesters at the time, I then got my degree and made the Sexton Scholar list. I got my iron ring, which hasn't come off my finger to this day. So that was a proud moment, having my dad and brother at the ceremony. And my dad was able to actually give me the ring. So if you have a ring, you're allowed to attend. And then my mom had to wait in the car. The electricals then graduated in the fall term of 2014, and I was then offered a full-time job at AKA starting in January 2015, and then my journey really began. Having done the co-op work terms at AKA, I already was up to speed on the workings of AKA and got thrown into things right away. I got involved in the design and testing of our energy storage cabinets, so they're used with ultracapacitors that winter, and then my love for figuring things out and troubleshooting grew. After being there for about 6 months, they asked if I would go to Singapore for a work assignment. I remember getting the phone call and being like, oh, just 1 minute, please. I was quickly Googling where Singapore was, so geography wasn't my forte. So I agreed to go. So first I had to complete my BOISIT. So some may find fun, some may find terrifying. I thought it was terrifying. So it's a license you need to then work on an oil rig and go on a helicopter over water. So they strapped us to a fake helicopter and dunked us in a pool and had it flip upside down and rotate. And then we had to escape, break the windows, all while holding our breath, and then repeat that 6 times to imitate different types of helicopters. Not fun. And then we had to do it every 3 years. The only part I didn't hate was the floating formation. And then they dumped us in the Halifax Harbor for a bit so we could practice our cold water training. 1 week after that, I left for Singapore, and I never really traveled much before this. Like, I was very much a homebody. Like, I was terrified when I had to move to Halifax. So I spent the next 6 months in Singapore representing the company at the shipyard and being a part of the design process for these 2 new drill ships that were going to be built in Singapore shipyard for Transocean, which is an oil company based out of the States. I was the only employee of AKA that was there, and there was a steep learning curve on that one, technically and politically. And then the time difference of having the support from the office back home, it just didn't line up. So as design changes and disagreements between interfaces and electrical signals could cost the other companies a lot of money, everything was very political. AKA was more customizable, and the other vendors had like a set package. They've done that for the last 40 years. They weren't keen on changing things. Took me a few weeks of working to actually prove myself and gain the respect in our weekly meetings. I was the only female, and I was the only one under the age of 40, so it took a while to gain their respect. But after I got the grasp of how things worked, respect was earned, and then the progress was really made. I never did see myself working in the oil field or doing this type of work, but it turned out that I absolutely loved it. I did a couple of months in the Houston office working out of the Transocean office so we could work directly with our client. I could do the design changes and map up the drawings directly with our drafting team in Houston. I would represent our company in various conferences, and after the technical questions that came our way, the main conference I attended each year was the Dynamic Positioning Conference, which is a system that allows a vessel to maintain its position automatically using the propulsion system. So if you are drilling, then you don't break the drill line with the vessel moving. I'm also really curious in the virtual reality technology that we're seeing more and more of. That's becoming, more available to us for training and stuff. I completed a crane operator course, but I found it's not for me. I get motion sickness very easily, so I'll have to put the virtual training on the back burner, but I do think it's a really cool thing that's becoming more available. So after that assignment, the company was short on commissioning engineers. So then I flew to South Korea, where I worked on and off for 3 years. But this time was with fellow coworkers and a chapter I really enjoyed. So it was really incredible to see the equipment work in the field with all the other vendors, such as like GE, NOV, and the shipyard. I worked on the schematics for hours for this equipment when I was in PEI, and I seen our manufacturing department build them, but it was just a whole other level seeing it work outside of the test bay and on the drill ship and fully installed. We supplied the full electrical package, so all the UPS, so uninterruptible power supplies, the drilling switchboard, the main power switchboards, and the emergency switchboard. There were 5 of these drill ships in the shipyard in South Korea that were being built, so I was based on land for the majority of that time. In 2017, I spent 46 weeks out of the year in South Korea working 12-hour days, so it was the younger me that had the energy. Now at Maritime Electric, like working the storms last 2 weekends, like they killed me. I don't know how I did it. And my love for Korean barbecue also kept me afloat. I spent a lot of time in dimly lit machinery spaces, whether tweaking software. I did save the big writing software changes to the software engineer, changing fuses, clearing errors, or pulling cables. So also, if you have candles in the machinery space, because I spent one birthday there, make sure you don't get caught. That's a big rule breaker. So I did get in trouble for that. Even though I was away from home, it became like a second home, spending a lot of time together with your coworkers and sometimes bad environments or very stressful environments when something's not working and you have a bunch of clients standing behind you with their arms folded. So that really created a work family environment, and especially with the equipment that is very dangerous, you needed to trust your work family and ensure yourself that all the proper protections and lockouts were met, as we also were dealing with the language barrier in Korea. So like we just really needed to make sure that we relied on each other for each other's safety. So one of my favorite work experiences to date is the transit I did on the last vessel we worked on in Korea. So after the sea trials were completed, the vessel needed to make its way from South Korea to the Gulf of Mexico, where it was then gonna drill there. So this job started around December 1st, and then that would mean missing Christmas and New Year's. So since I was one of the few that had no family at work, I was sort of voluntold to the assignment. So the contract required that a couple of each vendors of the equipment on the vessel were present for technical support, or if something went wrong, could be addressed. And then I was also in charge of training the staff on our software and equipment. It had a university vibe, so you can kind of see the small room I was stuck in. And we did have a roommate, but they were on a different shift. So realistically, you could never see your roommate, because then you would work 6 to 6 and then 6 to 6. So and then there was meal hall, which I loved. Like it's so easy to start work at 6 a.m. when you just go downstairs and breakfast is already cooked and you can just eat whatever you want. There was training on board for the actual oil rig staff who were a part of transit. So I took advantage of that, as I love to learn and gain new skills and something for the resume. So I took part in some rigging courses. So I learned a lot of rope skills and then crane operator hand languages and knots. I worked on doing some outstanding design changes and improvements, as having 2 more drill ships being built in Singapore. Continuous improvements were retrofitted onto the Korean vessels. So halfway through transit, we reached South Africa, which was crew change day for everybody and was supposed to be for me too. I was supposed to get off the ship. Well, they had no other resources and I didn't get off the ship. So 30 more days to go before the crew change boat came for me near Louisiana. Those first few steps on land were very wobbly. I did get my sea legs. I also get really seasick and learned that the center of gravity in the ship became my favorite place during the really rocky weather. So I lived on gravel for a couple weeks, and I learned that in America, they don't call it gravel, and they had no idea what I was asking for the first bit. So I really enjoyed being organized and dealing with clients. So I expressed my interest to the company in becoming a technical project manager. I wasn't ready to walk away from the hands-on experience just yet. So I got more involved with new vessels, hybrid ferries that were going to be built for TT Line in China and C-SPAN. I was then in PEI long enough to get my butt in gear and finally write my logbook. So you guys are lucky, you guys don't have to do logbooks anymore. But if you do, I do not recommend leaving the logbooks until after the 4 years work experience is complete. Otherwise, it just feels like a never-ending English essay, which we all didn't take arts for a reason. We don't like writing essays. Another fun work trip was doing an electrical survey on one of the Navy vessels in Halifax, which then led to going on to the submarine in Halifax. It was then inland. Now, if you think your dorm room is tiny, try living on a submarine. Luckily, I'm a short, so the tour wasn't too horrible for me and I didn't have to hunch during the whole time, but I still had to hunch and I'm like 5'2". So I was glad to get out of the submarine after the tour was complete. So then I just feel like my career changed me. So shy, timid me, who spent the majority of the 4 years outside Canada, I then caught the travel bug. And then I was always fascinated on how the rest of the world works and what technology they have and what improvements will be coming to us next or what we can pass on. So I did go to Kyrgyzstan to spend a personal week on horseback without plumbing or electricity for a full week to see how things worked over there. So I was really shocked to learn that dung is a source of heating since they don't have many trees for woods and many trees for wood to burn. So that was something I just never thought of before. So there's always knowledge out there if we have our eyes open. Then some of my friends who are civil engineers on the island, and I went backpacking Costa Rica. And of course, them being structural civil engineers and do most of the bridge testing for PEI, they wanted to go to the Panama Canal. So we went to Panama to sit and just watch the incredible engineering feat of the canal. And then through the commissioning team in Korea, we met a contractor from India who then invited myself and some other AKA employees to his wedding, which wouldn't have been possible without making the colleague connections from all over. So then these three, or I guess us four, then worked at AKA together. So wanting to continue learning and trying new things. So after 5 years of being at AKA, I thought it was good to try something new and maybe have some more stability in my life and stay put on the island for a while. I saw that Maritime Electric had a job opening, which is where I thought I was going to end up when I was in university. I just always thought I'd work for the island's power company because then I specialized in power systems when I was at DAL. I work in the operations department and focus on standards, designing underground subdivisions and circuits, which is why I did I just did my first transmission line design, which uses a software called PLS CAD, where you then analyze the LiDAR, the pole structures, the wind, snow, ice loading on the conductors and make custom structures to make sure you meet all of CSA standards. So if you are driving down the Kincora Highway, all the newly put in poles, so that was one of my transmission lines, so that's kind of cool. I'm very excited and curious to see where the electrification heads and all the renewable energies and see how that is going to change the utility industry in the near and distant future. Then last year, I also joined EngineersPEI Council, and I really hope to meet some of you at the EngineersPEI events. So if you see me there, don't hesitate to come and say hi. And I guess my final message is that you never know where you're going to end up and never pass up an opportunity to learn and grow as an engineer and take pride in your work. And if you have a certain interest, pursue it, figure out a way to apply your skills and knowledge to it and just see where it will take you.
Thank you, Marianne. Loved seeing all the pictures, especially those travel ones. It's very heartening to see that even as an engineer, you get to do tons of traveling, which is something I'm very much looking forward to as I come to the end of the education. Our next speaker will be Brian Stewart. He is a P.Eng, and he's currently working as a general manager / executive director for Elanco Canada here in PEI. So Brian, you can take over the screen and start presenting.
Hi, can everybody hear me? Great. Thank you to Barry and to Libby to ask me to come here to talk today. I haven't really taken the time to just sit down and look at some of the things I've been able to do as an engineer and and it's really interesting. So thank you for the opportunity to sit down and do this. So for fear of being a boomer, I'll try not to, and I'm not that old, by the way, but I'll try not to bore you too long, but a little bit about myself. I grew up in Crapo, so I'm from the island. Always grew up around engines and tractors, and my brothers are into tractor pulling. That's my brother's pull tractor there. I'm the announcer at it. My father was the original director of the P.E.I. Truck and Tractor Pull Championships of downtown Crapo. So always around engines and skidoos and motorbikes, and way before the internet, and that's aging me. I always knew I loved tearing stuff apart, seeing how it works, doing Lego, and even now, you can see the lawn tractors there. I tear them apart, fix them up, and put them back to pristine condition, and I sell them. I make a profit too. But it's the high-end recycling, I call it, and learning about stuff if there's an electrical issue. So those types of things I think engineers have in common. They're just curious on just how things work. I got amusement out of your picture, Marianne, of you going across the boat while the bridge was being built. I was working on the bridge and helped put me through university and buy a wedding ring. That's really aging me now. So I did 3 summers on the bridge. I was in the engineer lineup to sign up as a project engineer to help out with doing some stress testing on the bridge. And my buddy was in the line next to me, and I said, "What are you in line for?" And he said, "Concrete labor." And I said, "Well, what do they make an hour?" And it was like $16 an hour, and the engineers are making $10 an hour. So I jumped the line. So I poured concrete for 3 years and learned a lot about just concrete workers and the guys working on construction sites. And again, my dad was in construction his whole life, so I was fit right in. So I enjoyed myself on the bridge, and long hours, but once in a lifetime project to be a part of. And I'm standing at the top of the pier, probably 260 feet above the ground there without a harness, and that's how dumb we can be sometimes. So that's not a great picture. But anyway, it was a fun project. And my mom and dad are still in Crapo. Dad's 81, mom's going to be 80 this year, and always part of the community, taught me community service. Work hard, play hard. I got married in university. I don't know how I would, it's not for everyone, but for me, it was the first time I started getting A's. So my last year at university, I went to UPEI for 3 years, and then I went to UMB for 3 years. And I took mechanical engineering, but I got married my last year, and it did help straighten me out a little bit. So that's my wife, Joanna. And then we have 3 kids now, Eric, Ivan, and Daisy. Some of the other interests I have is I love making sandcastles in the summertime. So that creativity side's got to come out somewhere. So with an office-driven job, you look for whether it's rebuilding a lawn tractor or going to make a lobster out of sand, and everybody's going, "What? Wow, that's cool!" and or playing ping pong or whatever it might be. So that's a little bit about myself. So just a good old boy, and just grew up in the country and tore stuff apart and had some fun. So for a career though, I started out of UMB. I got recruited by Procter & Gamble. There had been a lot of alumni that moved from the New Brunswick University and went to Brockville, Ontario. So I left the island and I thought, okay, I'm going to leave, and eventually I'll come back to PEI and I'll build a cottage and we'll move back in the summers, and I'll see PEI in my 50s or 60s and never come back, because there weren't the same number of jobs as there is now. So it was quite a different environment. So I went to Procter & Gamble. I worked there out of the gate. I worked as a team leader or supervisor of a team making Tide laundry detergent. So that was a really interesting role. I had 15 people on my team. I was in my early 20s. So, doing that and learning about people, you go through school and you think, what am I doing? I'm running a shift and making soap, and I'm shoveling soap up off the floor, or I'm up on the roof trying to clean out a clogged filter. And did I go to school to do all this? But what you do learn is about people. When you have to write someone up, or heaven forbid, you have to let them go. Those are things that it's hard to imagine doing it, but when you understand how things go and just why people are the way they are, they didn't teach a lot about the people side of engineering. And after touring with Libby and learn more about how the program is now, the sustainable design engineering, it's quite impressive about how much of those soft skills come through now in the education system, which is phenomenal. But I learned on the fly. So I did team leader roles, and then they start moving me into some projects. So we actually started up the first Swiffer line in Canada, who was for North America. So I got to do some traveling over to Belgium and Germany for the technology that they were transferring from Europe. So we started up Swiffer, and it was an old diaper line that had the folding, almost a similar folding pattern as a diaper, and we converted it over to a Swiffer line. That was really, really interesting. The plant was predominantly a Tide manufacturing plant. Swiffer had just kind of gotten going. Tide was a powder detergent back then, but it was converting quickly over to liquid, which was more out of the plants out of the US. So they actually started offering some packages, and I took a package. They didn't expect me to, but I took a package and ended up moving back to PEI to work at Cavendish Farms. The same day I learned that I got the job at Cavendish Farms, we learned that we were going to have our second child, which was Ivan. So it was kind of fate. Everything seems to happen for a reason. So we moved back to PEI, and I can tell you the time away from PEI and then coming back, everything's different. You smell the ocean. It's really interesting. If you just live in PEI your whole life, it's great. But to move away and then to come back, there's a new appreciation for beaches and for as beautiful as Ontario was. It was so nice to get back home. So I worked at Cavendish Farms making French fries. So it was an Irving company. It was a 7/24 operation, a high expectation, high reward type role. I worked first in logistics. So that's not something you kind of go through school for, but logistics is just another system. So set it up and led the team there, led the department. I then moved into continuous improvement. I got Lean Six Sigma, Green Belt, and Black Belt. So that's a way to look at waste and how to reduce waste. And it's like its own language, but once you learn it, it's applicable to anything that you do in the future. So that to me was my MBA, because that led me to many future opportunities because of that certification. So I did that, and then I moved into operations management. So I ran their larger factory in New Annan. So this is where Cavendish Farms is, New Annan, Prince Edward Island, and ran the operation and had lots of trials and tribulations to that, responsible for a whole factory. But what you do learn is as you move up, you grow a strong team underneath you to help. You don't do it all on your own. And so I built up a strong team, but I still remember it was a 7/24, very, very demanding job. Your phone was on you. My BlackBerry at the time was on me all the time. I decided to shut my BlackBerry off to go to church one Sunday morning. And because my wife, Joanna, was like, just shut it off, but you're always kind of worried about something happening. So I said, okay, I'll shut it off. And I got out of church and I turned my phone back on, and the plant had caught on fire. So I had about 92 messages on my phone, including the president of the company, Mr. Robert Urban, who was flying over immediately in his helicopter. So, it's just one of those things. And these are the types of experiences as you go through your engineering career. You take it for what it is. And I won't forget that ever. And it doesn't matter what you do. Things are going to happen to you. It's how you react. So we got through that. There was no damage. Nobody got hurt. And it kind of builds you a little stronger, a little thicker skin. And you just try to learn from those types of instances. After 8 years at Cavendish, I got headhunted by a company called Arla. And I'm going to go quickly through this, don't worry. So they're a dairy company, but they buy 60% of the milk on Prince Edward Island. So of all the fields around Prince Edward Island, Arla, a Danish company, buys 60% of the milk, and they convert it into Havarti and feta cheese and sells it all across Canada. So the other 40% goes to ADL. So not many people know that. So that's at least where it was when I was there back in 2012 to 2015. So I worked as the contact for Arla within their ADL dairy. So I was responsible for all their product as a third-party contractor, but I had no direct reports, but I had to try to influence and work with folks. I put in some new technology, a new cheese cutter, and it saved like 20% of the waste. And so integrating technology into, and some of my CI learnings, continuous improvement learnings that I got from the Lean Six Sigma training really came through: data, analytics, statistics, all that good stuff that everybody should love to do. They were a Danish company as well, so I got to travel to Denmark, which was really neat because my wife's family is from Denmark. Her father is originally from Copenhagen, so I got to go over and train there for a month and a half. So it was really neat to see that part. Much like Marianne, being able to see part of the world is what a great opportunity. On someone other's dime and you're learning, and I was able to bring my family over for that too, so that was really cool. So I did that for about 3.5 years, three and a half years. And then I had it set up pretty good. It made you have that initial curve of learning, implementing, and then kind of reaping the rewards. And it's starting to kind of flatline out a little bit. So a headhunter came along and said, "Hey, we got a job to run a whole plant, a whole factory at Sekisui Diagnostics." And I said, "What's that?" And so I learned, and I also worked with someone there from Cavendish Farms who was now one of the operations folks, and they said, "You'd love it, come on over." So not one to miss an opportunity. It was a medical, so you look at the value of goods, consumer product goods from Procter & Gamble, not too bad margins, potato, French fries, okay margins, cheese, okay, the margins are getting up a little bit higher. Medical products, high margin, lower volume. So that to me was a really interesting shift in the career. So I jumped on board with Sekisui Diagnostics as a plant manager. So long story short, we get in there and made quite a few changes. It needed some personnel changes, so you have to be delicate with that. You have to bring in people that you trust and have strong capability, and again, support that that can help you run a factory. And they produce test kits, blood test kits for hospitals. So if you go into a hospital and you get your blood checked for A1C, for diabetes, or for anything, they make the kit for the machines in the hospital, some little cartridges. So if you think of it like a printer, they make like the ink cartridges, but they do blood test kits. So I ran the site, put my stamp on it. We expanded the site. When it first came, there was talk of whether or not you're going to continue on running the Sekisui operations in Charlottetown. We built the brand up, and by the end of it, they were moving operations from Japan to Charlottetown. So that was not just me, but that was the team that we had, and so that it was really fascinating. And I'll show some pictures, but the Japanese culture is phenomenal. I think it's probably similar to Korean. It's a huge learning curve to understand when you're in meetings with folks from that part of the world. Just what do they mean? Are they happy? Are they sad? Are they yelling at me? Are they really mad at me? Or are they just so? Learn the acumen. I took a week-long course on Japanese culture. That was it was a really cool role. So after 3.5 years, so again, I had kind of peaked and plateaued on some of the improvements and stuff that I wanted to get done. And then I got recruited for Elanco. So that's where I'm at currently. They make vaccines for salmon. So for deep water salmon that go, they vaccinate the fish on land, and then they take them out to sea, and they have these large areas where they grow them for the market, mostly in Norway, excuse me, and for east west coast of Canada and Chile, where all the coastlines are of the world. So Again, have enjoyed my time there, build the team up again as a site leader, general manager. And let's see, where'd my screen go? Excuse me. Okay, there we're back. So I've been there for the last 3 years, and I've implemented again another team and the process team concept, I guess, we put into place. So when it first came, it was very matrix. They had each department kind of in their own place. So we put process teams in place so that we could have quality engineering, supply chain, and all the departments in one process team. So that was learned from another site, and we implemented it, and one of the key things. So, and that's where I'm at now, but I just put in my resignation before Christmas because I got headhunted for another role, and I'll be starting it on Monday. So I'm going to be Vice President of Operations for a new seafood company in Atlantic, Canada that's just starting up. So they process lobster and crab, and the industry is going through a massive consolidation. So if I think back in Cavendish Farms time, a lot of the farms were smaller family-run farms, and they were getting larger and larger and larger just to have economies of scale. The same thing's happening in the seafood industry with the processors. So Champlain now has bought 7 or 8 of these smaller processors, and they're setting up a corporate structure. So I'll come in and I'll have responsibility for different factories. So that's kind of the next step of where I want to go in my career, rather than I've run now 2 sites on my own. Now this will be multiple sites, and I'll have plant managers reporting into me. So it's a nice natural career progression for me. And so I'm excited to start on Monday. So Atlanco was a fantastic place to work, and I've appreciated learning all about vaccines. Biotechnology is a growing industry on PEI. There's so many jobs out right now that they can't fill them all. So engineers fit right into that because we're so multifaceted in what actually you can go out and do, because everything, like I say, is a system. So yeah. So just a couple of just the pictures. Japan was a phenomenal place to go. Got to go because of Sekisui. I got to take 7 trips over, going to Tokyo and Kyoto mostly. But anytime you have the chance to go somewhere for business, I always try to learn the culture, learn about the factories are phenomenal. I wasn't allowed to take many pictures inside of factories. It's much like Kent Homes. They have these big assembly lines, but it was like 100 times bigger. I forget how many football fields big, but they were making these homes. Mount Fuji and high-speed trains and lots of fish, and karaoke, of course. That was a lot of fun. And then other parts of the world, I did Muay Thai fighting in Thailand. I paid somebody $5 and then let me go up. He could have beat the crap out of me, but anyway, he let me play around in the ring, so that was fun. Largest cuckoo clock in the world was in Germany, so you had to go see that. You have some Guinness, and even historical things when you're traveling around for engineering, going to a cemetery in Netherlands and learn about how the Canadians went through there in the war and helped free up that part of the world. So you learn as you go. You got to have fun as you go, and I think you as well, Marianne, probably through other parts of the world, you get that bug, because the more you see of the world, the smaller it gets, because the more you understand how similar everything else is around the world. It's just a different flavor, but we're all the same. So it's really fascinating. So 9 key learnings and I'm done, I promise. So get a good base of knowledge before jumping around in companies. So I was able to get out and kind of get that at both Procter & Gamble and Cavendish Farms. You have kind of build that base, because I do see some young engineers get in and within a year and a half, they feel like they've outgrown the company. Maybe they have, but in general, you should try to stick around for at least 2 to 3 years anyway, you're in the roles, because it allows you to get in, start making changes, and start seeing some of the fruits of your labor. I would highly suggest, if you're ever thinking of getting into operation management or business management, just get a supervisor manager role early on. I had that at Procter & Gamble. It was hard. It was really hard, but because you learn all about how to control systems, but a person is such a complex system, and there's a lot of books on it, but you just have to learn, and you need the experience. I did shift work as well early on. That's an experience you always take on, and do it when you're young and full of energy, not when you're old like me. I'll skip that one. Try to get in Lean Six Sigma training early on. To me, it's better than an MBA. Like, everybody goes out and an MBA is, and no, nothing against anyone getting an MBA, but the Lean Six Sigma training and the engineering career path is highly sought after. So if you have certification in Lean and Six Sigma, it's that data conversion of taking large groups of data. How do you look at and filtering through that, and being able to manipulate data or look and see losses, and you make money hand over fist. So I highly suggest that. Look, vaccines, I really had no idea vaccines. I did not enjoy the chemical side of the learning at the university, but I learned a lot, and so you just, it pushes you to don't go for the easy stuff. And if you get really cocky, everyone's replaceable. I remember one of my bosses said, stick your hand in a bucket of water and pull it out, and that's the impact that you'll have. So it's a bit extreme, but no one company should be built on one person. So as important as you may think you are ever going to be, just remember that, everything's going to, you're replaceable. So be humble. So it's important to stay humble. You teach others how to treat you. So this one I see all the time. So you're working really hard, and but you have to make sure that you're setting the tone of how you want it to be. Find a good partner in life. That was my wife, and I wouldn't have been able to do anything without her. Everything's happening for a reason, so find the pony in the pile of manure, and just be careful about chasing title and money or climbing too fast. You need a solid base. So I think I've gone over my time. I'm really sorry. Yeah, that's it. That's all I had.
No need for apologies, Brian. That was a wonderful presentation. A really great way to end it off. It's really great knowledge there at the end. Much appreciated. All right, so the last speaker we have for this evening is a former UPEI graduate, Jordan Sampson. He currently works at Maritime Electric as the sustainability coordinator. So Jordan, I'm handing it off to you now.
Thanks so much, Barry, and great presentations, Marianne and Brian. It's great to hear about your careers. So I'm going to try and do a bit of a hybrid presentation, speak a little bit and show some photos as well. I don't have as many photos as Marianne. Must have a lot of room on her phone for them, but yeah, so I'll start with who I am. So my name's Jordan Sampson, and like Barry mentioned, I graduated from UPEI in 2019. So I did the 4-year sustainable design, and I specialized in mechatronics. And in second year of the program, I had a project with an oyster company in PEI, and we developed the oyster cage flipper as a solution. And the project ended up going really well. I have a photo here to share. And we ended up actually building a prototype, as you can see here on the left. Everyone can see my screen? Yeah. Okay. So yeah, so we developed a prototype and tested it and stuff like that. We actually got a couple of patents on the design as well, which was a really great experience. And we actually formed a corporation, started a business with this as well. It's been quite a few years now since this, and the company, it hasn't done very much. I wouldn't call it a success or anything, but I certainly learned a lot during the process, and wouldn't change anything if I could today. I got to, do lots of presentations to investors and to business people, which was a really good experience for me. As engineers, we can get pretty technical and pretty bogged down into the details, and being able to present to people like investors was a little challenging at first, but really a good experience. So I definitely would recommend trying to kind of go outside of your comfort zone a little bit in terms of projects and presentations as well. I'll just mention there was a time when we were in Halifax and we presented in front of about 100 investors, and they probably all had a net worth of over $10 million, and it was the most scary thing I've ever done. And it kind of felt like I was on Dragon's Den, but there was 50 dragons, and they really can push you with some pretty hard questions. So it was all a really good experience. After UPEI, I did my MBA. I know Brian just mentioned the MBA there, but yeah, I did do my MBA. I graduated last year with the MBA program, and very similar situation to the business we started. As an engineer, we get into a lot of the details, and I was put, like, in the engineering degree, we worked a lot in teams, and I was worked well in a team. But then I got put in a team with a musician and a nurse, and I was like, whoa, this is totally different, right? But you're going to come across that in your career, and it was a great opportunity for me to kind of learn about business and also about other different fields as well, just because of my teammates. Yeah, so I would recommend an MBA, even though Brian recommends the Six Sigma, but it depends too where you are in your career. UPEI has a really good 1-year MBA program that I would highly recommend if you're just graduating. They typically will accept engineering students, so that's a good option. So now I'll switch gears a bit and talk about my professional career. And so I just want to start by saying that whenever I was in the engineering program, I really wanted an engineering job. And it was like the only thing that mattered to me is that I would get an engineering job. And so in first year, I actually applied to Maritime Electric. They had a posting for a summer internship for an engineering student. And I had an interview, which I was really, really happy about. I went to the interview. It went super, super well. I came back home and I told my parents, I'm sure I've got the job. That, there's no way I didn't get it. It sounded like I was going to get it. And about a week later, I was still waiting for a call back, and I got a call about a week later. And they said, well, you didn't get the engineering job, but we have a meter reading job that's available for you. And this was like the worst possible news I could have gotten. If you don't know what a meter reader is, you may have seen some of these on your house or your apartment or your parents' home. And it's basically a little device that measures how much electricity you use in your home. And once a month, to determine how much your bill is going to be, the meter readers go around and they read the meters to see what those numbers are on the meter to determine how much to charge the customer. So talk about the most probably boring job you've ever heard of. That's what they offered me, but I didn't have much of a choice. I was in the first year, and I didn't have many other offers, so I decided to take it anyways. And I think you'll see that it was a good decision to take it. I'll talk about that a bit later. So meter reading actually ended up being a lot more fun than I thought it was going to be. So I read meters, and I also disconnected and connected power for new customers or like cottages and things like that. And I worked anywhere from Crapo, so kind of central west PEI, all the way to East Point in PEI, Surrey area. And I just drove for 8 hours a day. All the meters, you used to have to read them manually, but now you just have to drive by and they'll read the meters for you. And I got to explore so many parts of PEI that I never knew existed. there's so many back roads and things like that. But there's some beautiful mansions on PEI that I never knew were there too. Anywhere where there was no trespassing signs, you know, typically you would never get to go down, but I sometimes had to go down those lanes. So it was pretty cool to see what was down some of the streets. So I had a lot of fun that summer, and luckily for me, the following summer after my second year, there was another posting for an engineering student, and I of course applied again. And this time, because of the work I did as a meter reader, they already knew who I was. It was way easier to get the engineering position, so I was offered that engineering position. And it was really cool when I started that job, because Maritime Electric was just finishing up their interconnection project. So in 2017, 2016-17, they laid 2 large electrical cables from New Brunswick to PEI, and they actually dug trenches and embedded these cables in the trenches under the water, and then filled the trenches back up. So I think it was like over a year-long, $140 million project, the biggest project in the company's history. And on day one of my job, I started working on this. It was kind of near the end of the project, but nevertheless, I got to learn a lot. One of the projects we worked on was developing this riprap wall. So the underground cables are actually under the beach here, and they kind of go towards land. And with PEI's weather, we really wanted to make sure that we were going to protect those cables so that they didn't become exposed in the future. So we designed and had a contractor build this riprap wall to basically protect the shoreline from waves and coastal erosion. And you can see the substation there in the back, which is where the cables go to. So that was my first summer. It was kind of my first taste at engineering. And what I love most about that is just being outside so much. I was outside probably half of the time, which was really exciting in the summertime. Then the following summer, another thing I worked on was removing or decommissioning turbine number 6 in a steam plant that we owned. And you've probably seen this at UPEI in the hallway if you've been there in the last couple of years. I think they polished it up a little bit. But so this turbine was installed in the 60s, I believe, and it was retired when I started my position, and one of the projects I worked on was actually removing this turbine and dismantling it. So here's a photo of them actually removing the cover in 2017. And when you put something together, you usually have blueprints and you have a design to go off of, and all the nuts and bolts fit together perfectly most of the time, and everything comes together. But when you're dismantling stuff, there's sometimes things that are rusted together, or you don't know what's going to be under the cover when you crack it open. There's kind of lots of surprises when you're dismantling stuff. So it was a pretty unique experience, and it required a lot of decision making kind of in the moment. The following summer, I worked again at Maritime Electric, but I got moved to a different department. So I got moved in the operations department, the same department that Marianne's in right now. And this was a really good experience. I got to kind of do more work with the poles and wires, if you want to call it that. And I also worked with the surveyors a lot. So the surveyors were outside all the time, and they would kind of go and determine where poles were going to go. They would take a design similar to what Marianne has done for the transmission line, and they would go put stakes on where the poles are going to go. So I worked on that for a summer. And then the following year was my graduating year, and I got offered a full-time engineering job at Maritime Electric. And that's when I really became grateful that I took the meter reading job. Even though it sounded so boring at the time, I was really happy to have taken it, because now I had a full-time job offer. And when I started my engineering position, the first project that I worked on was this project here. And we have combustion turbines at a site in Charlottetown, and these are large fuel tanks for them. And every 10 years, we have to drain the tanks and do a very thorough inspection of the inside of them. And so that's my manager at the time. He kind of told me that I was going to be the lead on this project, and I was going to manage the contractors. So it was kind of the first big project for me. And the way, you know, we have all this fuel in the tank, and we don't want to just burn it because then it's kind of wasted. But at the same time, we need to get the fuel out of the tank. So what we did is we shipped a bunch of temporary fuel storage containers to the site, and this was us trying to take these storage containers into the dike area next to the fuel tanks. They had to be fairly close. And as you can see, I don't know if you can notice the gravel there, but the tanks weren't cooperating very well. Wasn't a very nice sound to hear the metal grinding against the gravel. And the truck got stuck multiple times and was actually starting to make big ruts in the gravel. And we quickly realized that this wasn't going to work. And talk about me being pretty nervous in that situation. To solve it, we ended up actually taking in a crane, which took a little bit longer and was more expensive, of course, but we ended up getting all of the containers here, as you see inside the area next to the fuel tanks. And looking back at it now, there's no way we were going to be able to drive those containers in anyways. That was kind of my first experience managing a project. I went way over budget and was way over the timeline that I'd been given. So felt like a bit of a failure, but it's all a learning experience. So overall, the project went well in the end. Then one of the other projects I worked on there, this is the combustion turbine. And every 10 or 15 years, you have to remove the turbine from its housing and do a major overhaul in it. And we were doing this down in Houston, Texas. And just to give you an idea here, so this is a 50 megawatt combustion turbine, and it's actually the same style of engine that's on a Boeing 747 airplane. And I like to always tell people that, you know, this is a 50 megawatt turbine, and PEI's load in the spring or the fall is, you know, can be around 200 megawatts on an average day. And a Boeing 747 actually has 4 of these engines. So if you want to think about it, one Boeing 747 could power the electricity for all of PEI in the spring or the fall, depending on the load. So it's kind of a really cool piece of equipment. Very, very delicate, lots of very, very expensive parts, like the bolts. One bolt for this turbine can be upwards of $1,000 just because of the material that it's made of. Very, very, very high heat in the turbine. So we were tasked with taking the turbine out, which was pretty challenging. We actually ended up putting it on this dolly and rolling it out. And then this is probably the most I've ever sweat on the job. It was about 30 degrees out, and I had the turbine lifted with a crane to transfer it to a transfer truck that was going to ship it to Houston. And this piece of equipment is probably around $25 million or more. So yeah, I had to change my shirt a couple times that day, but it's pretty stressful. But everything worked out in the end, so that was good. Another project I worked on in this job was we had this record storage room that was being underutilized, and we really needed a new communications room at Maritime Electric. And so my manager at the time told me that they wanted to transform this storage room into a communications room. And we kind of met a few times with a few more employees, our IT employees, and kind of figured out what needed to be done, what equipment they needed and stuff. And everything seemed pretty straightforward. And then when we actually went to start the project, this is what it looked like. And I had contractors asking me, you know, what's this wire for? And what's this pipe for? And I had no idea what any of it was at the time. It's a bit embarrassing, to be honest, but above this floor is actually our energy control center. And the energy control center basically controls the grid for all of PEI. And so it was really important that none of these wires were accidentally snipped or that the wrong wire was disconnected or anything like that. So, you know, I hope I'm not making you think that engineering is stressful, but I tended to get myself into all these situations where I was a little bit stressed, but you get through it. And this is how the communications room turned out in the end. So it was a really nice, it's got like a raised floor, and the air conditioning goes through the floor to make sure the room stays cool once all the equipment's in. And it also had a pretty unique fire suppression system. As you can see on the right, that's the kind of a new sprinkler system we installed for the building as a whole as well. So those really, really interesting projects I worked on. And currently, just in the last year, I switched jobs within Maritime Electric, and I'm now a sustainability coordinator with the company. And which is really cool because it really aligns with my engineering degree at UPEI. And I don't have really any photos from my current job because I'm in the office most of the time now, but I work on, you know, renewable energy planning. I work on greenhouse gas reduction planning. It's a lot more planning and strategy, which the MBA is really coming in handy for that. Yeah, so I'm really, really liking my new role, and I'm kind of a one-person department right now. So it's a little bit challenging. Every time I need to do work, I'm kind of starting with a blank page. There's no template that was made before, so it's a little bit challenging, but I'm really enjoying it. And just takeaways from my presentation, I mentioned the meter reading job, that I was just ashamed to take a meter reading job that seemed so boring. And to this day, I think the meter reading job was probably my favorite job that I've ever had. You know, some days when I'm in the office, I just wish I could be out there listening to the radio, driving around PEI, and probably be the best job around. So the real message that I want to convey to everyone is just don't get too caught up on, like Brian said, what your title is, or, you know, where you're working, especially for your first job or your summer internships, if you're able to get some. Don't get too caught up in them. Regardless of where you end up or what job you pick, you're going to learn something. You know, I think your first summer job is probably the hardest to get. And then once you kind of get rolling with your first and second and third positions, you know, the opportunities are endless as an engineer. You saw Marianne and myself and Brian speak, and even Brian's career path is very not linear. It's kind of all over the place. So you're going to have lots of opportunities as an engineer, and don't get too worked up about exactly where you want to be. Just get in there and do your best, and make sure you're always learning. That's it for me.
Thank you, Jordan. That was really great. So now we're going to open up the Q&A portion of this evening. So you can input your questions either in the chat, or you can raise your hand and unmute yourself and ask them yourself. So these questions can either be directed to one specific speaker or to the panel as a whole, and they can take turns answering. But just to start off, I have a question for the whole panel. If you could go back and do it all over again, what would you have done differently? Or alternatively, if you were happy with all your choices, what would you never think twice about changing? So Marianne, would you want to start off with that answer?
That's a tough one. If I was going to do something different, even though like I kind of love how it all turned out, but I did all 3 of my work terms at the same place, so I kind of had that path going for me. But it would have been nice to just explore what else is out there, because I could have done maybe co-ops at different places and then fell in love with like that career path, and it could have changed everything. So I never really got to see what else is out there. So I would say, if you can choose like your co-ops, like it is great going back to the same place because you've already built those relationships, you know that you either like it or you don't, but it would be nice to have seen like what other like electrical fields there are and where it would have taken me.
I would say for me, it kind of follows what I spoke about in the presentation, but I just wouldn't worry as much about getting that first engineering job, even the second or third job, if they're not engineering jobs, as long as you're doing something that's enjoyable and that you're learning. I really think that's all that matters. And I think the best engineers out there are those that have some hands-on experience as well, whether it be, welding, carpentry, pipe fitting, anything really. But when you do other skills, especially hands-on skills before engineering, it really gives you a better understanding of whether you're designing or things like that.
Yep. For me, I don't think I would have changed anything, and I'm very much everything happens for a reason. But I would say try to have other interests outside of work and engineering per se, and incorporate them into your interests. So if you have a creativity streak in you, find that vein so that you can find that balance. And in the end, it makes you a better engineer because you're not just one dimensional. The more interests and hobbies and stuff like that that you can kind of branch out into, the better.
Great, all very wise answers. I always appreciate getting some insight as I'm working on my degree and seeing where I should be aligning my interests in that sense. So I'm looking to the chat here, and our first question is for Jordan specifically. Do you have any tips or anything you wish you knew before you had gone into a mechatronics focus area specifically?
Okay, yeah, I think I have a tip. So I would say if you can, try and either buy or get your hands on an Arduino maybe. I think they would still use them hopefully in the mechatronics program. But there are tons and tons of tutorials online for how to work with Arduinos, program them, wire circuit boards and things like that. And they're very progressive from, very, very beginner to expert level. And there's just lots of resources. I think I once had a book that had like 100 different Arduino projects, and they just went from easy to hard. And I would think that would be very useful before going into the program, just to kind of get a bit of experience with wiring things and programming as well. And you have to probably have an Arduino anyways for the program, so it doesn't hurt.
Our next question is, it was mentioned that now it is not required anymore to do a logbook when working towards your P.Eng. How does it work now?
So I can probably touch on that from just like the council's point of view. So current EITs have the option to do the logbook still or the competency-based assessment. We're having discussions now if then like new grads, they won't have a choice. So maybe for some of you, by the time you graduate, you won't have a choice and you'll have to do the competency-based assessment. So I haven't really seen it too much, but it's basically, there's a bunch of categories of different assessments. So even if you are like electrical, like I filled out for one of my coworkers. So even though he's electrical, he still had to do like a climate change portion. And then he would learn about that topic, write about what he learned. And then he would put me as a supervisor for that. It got sent to me, and then like I would rate him on his understanding of it. And so it just has a bunch of categories like that. And the goal isn't to have like a 5-star in all these different categories. Like they just want to show like you have exposure to like all these different categories, like project management or relationships or the environment. And then it's just kind of like a ranking system, and based on what discipline you are, it kind of changes the categories as well. And then it's all online based. We are working with council to do an info session on it, and we would invite all like the student members and EITs because it is still fairly new. Like BC for our Engineers BC only uses that, and we're adopting it from them. So we're still trying to get our heads completely wrapped around it too.
Thank you, Marianne. Our next question here is from Matthew, and it's directed towards Marianne and Brian. So they said, you've both worked some jobs with some very long hours during your earlier years. Do you feel like working these demanding jobs early in your career propelled you to work further than someone working with an easier work-life balance? So Brian, would you want to start off?
Sure. I think at the time, it was definitely the best thing to do to gather that experience. And there are some jobs that are just to that. They're just very demanding. Whether or not I didn't take that path, I don't think I would have had necessarily as many opportunities open to me later on, because when you go through those periods and you kind of dig deep and you're working those hours, and in some case around the clock 7/24, it pushes you to learn more about yourself. And the more you can learn, you can't sustain that forever, but going through that period earlier in the career makes you a stronger engineer and just as an individual. So I don't regret doing it. I think as long as you're interested in it, anything I've ever done that, I've always been interested to learn about more, and I think it's made me a better engineer. So you can take the path and I had friends that had office jobs and they work 9 to 5, and that's fine. But I look where I'm at now, and in some cases I'm quite a bit farther ahead, but it's whatever makes you happy, right? Like if you don't like working long hours and you don't enjoy what you're doing, just evaluate it and make sure. But for me, it worked out.
Yeah, and I would have to probably say the same. Like when I did the long hours, like I absolutely loved it. But now that I have hobbies and a routine, and I finally got a dog, because I couldn't have that when I was traveling before, like I'm okay with an easier work-life balance. Like I love going home at the end of the night or on weekends, and yeah, so I wouldn't change it. And I feel like there are people that work the 9 to 5 jobs that advance just as much as on the people who work long hours. It all depends, like if you like what you're doing and you're kind of getting benefits out of it. Like if you're just working like a dog and like nothing's happening and they're just using you as a pawn because they can get away with you working all the long hours and not really getting a reward for it, it's probably not worth it. If it doesn't benefit you and it only benefits the company.
To me, it's always been, I'm visual, so I picture like a roller coaster. If you have a job and you're just straight lining, that's fine. But when you have those demanding jobs, you're going to have low points, lower than your flat line, but you're never going to reach those high points unless you're going through those low points. And it gives perspective and kind of some variety into how you approach your work and your job. So you can have your straight line jobs, everybody can find them, but they're never going to give you the highs that you can get to. So
Thank you both. Our next question is from Will. Does EIT come immediately after graduation or after the 4-year work experience? Should this work experience be full-time as well, or some projects you have done within your undergrad journey?
So you can apply to be an EIT as soon as you graduate. So in the 4-year work experience, currently the requirements are 1 year has to be in Canada. So you can work with a company outside of Canada or outside of Canada. If you do your master's, you can count that as 1 year of experience, and you can count up to a year of co-op and work terms as experience. And then with the new competency based, if you do like a design project for a company, like how UPI has their design projects, you're allowed to count up to a year of design projects in school towards it. So then it would be 3 years of like full-time work after graduation. And you don't have to necessarily, like say you didn't really know the process and you didn't apply to be an EIT until like 2 years into working, you can still apply then and count your previous time as well. Like it's not like it's a clock as soon as you apply.
Thank you. Now I see that Yvonne has their hand up. Yvonne, you can unmute yourself and ask your question.
I have a question for you. Yeah, I have a question for you. So you were working with some turbines. So I was wondering which course were you more focused on these cycles? Was it thermodynamics or physics?
I'm sorry, Yvonne, I don't think we're really able to hear your question. I see you have two open for Zoom, so maybe try unmuting your other screen.
Can you hear me now?
Not quite, sorry.
Just type it in. While Yvonne's doing that, Jordan, MBAs are awesome, by the way. I didn't mean to, there's no MBA bash, and I used the Lean Six Sigma certification. It's worked for me. So, but MBAs are very valuable. So
This is the business engineering rivalry I was talking about.
yeah,
I think it's a different way of thinking, just the business in general. One of the courses I took was strategy, and we were given an assignment, and I was asked to come up with a strategy for something. And I knew, all the math and the numbers and stuff from my engineering background, but I didn't have a clue what to do in the situation. So it's a different way of thinking for sure.
Yeah, for sure. Yep.
I see Yvonne's questions now in the chat. So this one is towards Jordan. Which course helped you more understand the turbines and cycles?
Thermodynamics, actually, surprisingly, and machines as well. I don't know if that's still a course, but yeah, my machines textbook that I dreaded during the machines course was on my desk pretty much all the time while we were working on those projects. So yeah.
Our next question we have here is, how useful would SolidWorks/CAD be in terms of job opportunities in the engineering field? So anyone can open that question.
I mean, it would depend what kind of engineer you want to be. For me, I've never used SolidWorks in my whole life, but if you want to be a draftsman, or you want a drafts person, or you want to be in that realm, that's fine. But for operations management, as long as you can read blueprints and go through drawings and understand that, you don't need to create it. But if you really want to be a designer, I would think it would be quite important, but I've not got any familiarity with it.
Yeah, I'd say the same. Like if you want more so the design path instead of operations, like it is really good having those skills. But then at the same time, most companies then will have like a drafting department, but it is nice if like maybe you to do like some changes on your own without having to wait for a drafter to do it. But these are also like can be learned on the job, because each company has like a different add-on software package to these programs. So like each company will be a little bit different with how they use the software.
Yeah, a lot of companies, like Marianne saying, they will train you and pay to train you to take whatever programs it is that they're using or convert. So if there's an interest there, they'll a lot of the times just pay for it.
Okay, thank you. Our next question is to Jordan. I know you recently graduated. Would you say there's a huge knowledge gap between AutoCAD and SolidWorks? Based on some job listings I have seen, they mention AutoCAD but not SolidWorks. What are your thoughts on this?
I would say a similar question to the last one, but I would say that it's not really the software that's important, or whether it's AutoCAD or SolidWorks, or there's hundreds of different softwares. It's more just that your ability to design that's important, and your ability to read blueprints, that's probably the most important. If you do want to learn AutoCAD, there is, I think, a free student version that you can play around with. But you'll find that if you know how to use SolidWorks, it's pretty quick to catch on to AutoCAD or Inventor, and vice versa. So I wouldn't say it's the name of the software that matters. It's more just that you understand the process and understand how to use it effectively.
Thank you. Our next question is for the panel as a whole. Based on all of your experiences, what would be some of the software, know-how, or technical skills to possess to develop a broad foundation before branching out into a particular field?
I know for us, or for me through my career, the more you know about Excel, because it can, I know I've done Minitab and I've done, everything, but everything comes back to Excel. Like I would do Word documents in Excel if I could, because it's so multitask. And if you get into macros and pivot tables and the manipulation of data within Excel, it's so powerful. But I would say Excel for me has been the key, as stupid as it sounds, but I mean, the more you know about it and proficient at it, you can save yourself tons of time. And Pi, Plan Information, OSIsoft, data collection software, they wouldn't teach that unless you got into the company. But that's another one where it takes large GADs of data and you can do time series plots and then put it into Minitab and do statistics on it in Minitab if you wanted to. But yeah, those would be the key ones that I've run into in the last 10 years anyway.
I would say the same about Excel. I'd probably use it every single day, a lot more than I thought I would when I was at school. So yeah, I know that's probably not the answer everybody's hoping for, depending on how much you like Excel. But once you get the hang of it, it's not too bad.
Our next question, is there a different procedure for international students to apply to be an EIT, or is the application procedure a generalized process across the board?
It's generalized across the board. So mostly like when you get your license, like you can be not a permanent resident. It's just wherever you're practicing engineering is then like the province you apply to.
Thank you, Marianne. Our next question is to Brian. This is from Yvonne. I always had a keen interest into the construction field. I was working on a site for light rail transportation and found it amazing. In PEI, where did you start off in that sector? Or where do you recommend to start? Even masoning was a great experience, and I would love to do it again if the opportunity presented itself.
Yeah, I wish I was a mason. I think that's one of the cool trades. So, but I haven't really been in construction industry other than working on the bridge. Beyond that, it's always been in manufacturing. But if I had an interest in it, the area I would start looking at would be in the general contractor. So there's Fitz and Snow and companies like that on PEI that run big projects. So you can get on as an engineer there to be a project manager, and you could be a foreman or a safety construction person monitoring safety on the construction site. And worst case, get in and just learn about all the different construction companies and just start talking to them to find which one might be interesting. But there's a lot of general contractors that'll go in and they'll run the whole site. So it can get you some introduction into supervisory things as well, which is always valuable.
Thank you, Brian. This next question, I'm actually going to open to the entire panel. What are some tips to get a summer engineering internship for a second-year student?
I would say a good tip would be to not be afraid to call people. I would probably try and keep your resume to 1 page. I always like to think of like 30-second resumes, because 30 seconds is probably the most amount of time that somebody's going to look at it before deciding whether they're going to interview you or not. So I would start with phone calls. I know it's a little bit hard with COVID to actually go to the organizations, but I would do a phone call and then follow that up with the resume, because otherwise I think you have to think that the person you're emailing and contacting, they could get 10 resumes in the summer. So if you want to kind of stand out a little bit, I would call first.
Yep. I'd say when you do the research, like Jordan's saying, do your homework as well. The more you know about the company and what's going on, like if they're in the news, understanding what expansion projects are going on, how do they impact the PEI economy, just in general, the more you know, the better, rather than just saying, I want a job. That can impress someone, because like Jordan said, most companies will have hundreds and hundreds of resumes. So don't don't get discouraged. You're going to get no's and a lot of them, and you never know. I've had it before where I've had someone, I said no, and 3 weeks later I'll come back and go, well, wait a minute, yeah, maybe I'll give them a chance, because something happens and you go back to it, or they called you up and say, have you found someone yet? I'm still interested. So don't be too pushy, but be persistent and find that balance, and just dig.
Then I would say, yeah, if it's hard with COVID now, but if you could do it in person, like that's the best way to drop off a resume. And then also be honest about your experience. I know, like when I applied for AK, I was like, I only worked at Tim Hortons. I have zero experience in engineering, but I'm willing to learn. And I kind of pushed the angle, like I want to learn, like I'm ready to train, like tell me what I need to know and I will learn it on the weekends, or I will just grow with it. So like, and I've been in some interviews where like their resume says one thing where they have like this and this and this, and then you ask them a question about it and then they don't. And that looks worse than if you're upfront and be like, I don't know, but I'm willing to know, like willing to learn.
Yeah. It may not be an engineering job for the summer that you just get anything within the company. Like Jordan mentioned about the meter reading, just get your foot in the door. You then understand who's who in the company, just anything, if that's where you really want to end up.
Thank you all. A next question we have, do you see a place for sustainable design engineers where you are working, or something similar?
Yeah, I mean, if I look at the last couple of places I've worked at and what I see through the tours with Libby and just learning more about what you're learning in sustainable design engineering, the part that comes through is the people interactions and working with clients and understanding how to talk with folks and how to pull a meeting together and what's important, how to prioritize. It's beyond kind of the engineering piece. It's just that's needed across the board. People who can solve problems and work with other people to solve problems. It's not an individual contributor that we're looking for. Someone to come in and work on a team and build that team up. So that's always a need. So I think, you know, the sustainable part is important, and that's going to be a given. But it's the skills you're learning in that university program at UPEI, that teamwork side of it. That's what's going to be really important going forward.
Yeah, I think it's definitely a need. I think like just knowing the program and the project-based learning that you all get at UPEI is just invaluable, because you get experience working on different projects with clients and with in teams as well. And that's really what's important. If you look at myself, I didn't do any sustainable design engineering when I started at Maritime Electric. And now, you know, I'm trying to kind of start a department in design, somewhat sustainable design, but, you know, just to become a more sustainable electricity company. So yeah, there's definitely a need for sure in the industry.
I think it's going to get better as more businesses on the island and maybe off the island learn more about this degree program, because it is fairly new and I don't think employers really understand, but they are becoming more educated on it. And I think then it will be an asset that they go after.
Yeah, I don't know if it's just because I started in the role in the last year, but just in the news lately, you know, it seems like every couple of days there's a new article about emissions or climate change or stuff like that. So I do think it's getting talked about a lot more these days. So it's kind of like, you know, 20, 30 years ago, if you were a software engineer, you could find any job you want. And it's still kind of like that. But I think in the future, if you are a sustainable design engineer, you could be in luck. So
a follow-up question to that one. Would you recommend tailoring your resume and cover letter to emphasize what some of these are soft skills and project experience?
Yeah, I would mention that that you work closely with a team and then work with industry. I think a lot all the way through first, second, third, fourth years. And yeah, that to me is different than how you think of just engineering and learning math and doing science and stuff. That soft skill piece is what's the biggest change than when I went through in the 90s. So yeah, that was a while ago.
Yeah, I would definitely put some of the design projects or your bigger projects on your resume, especially for like a summer or an internship. And then once you have that experience, then maybe move it towards what your work experience was for when you're looking for full time.
Yeah, I would say the soft skills are essential. Like it's kind of pass fail. If you don't have the soft skills, then that's it. And then your experience is kind of, your experience may not match exactly the employer that you're applying to, but any experience is good.
Thank you. This is a question that I have prepared. How did you make connections / network, and how has it helped you in the long run? This is open to everyone.
Yeah. You go ahead, Marianne.
Okay. And I'm not just saying this because I'm on the council, but even when I was a student member, I went to every single EngineersPEI event. I know COVID's a little bit difficult now with that, but they always do like a summer social Christmas party, and you just get to see all these professionals from so many different disciplines, and you get to talk to them in a relaxed environment. And I find it really builds, it's just a really good networking. And like most of the events for student members are like, you don't have to pay if you're a student member. So you get to go to the dinners, you get to go to the lobster cart, you get to go to all these things for free. And it's just such a relaxed setting to meet so many people. And now that I'm working on the island with a bunch of different businesses, because everyone kind of talks to Maritime Electric to get their power needs and stuff, and I'm realizing I'm getting emails from people and being like, oh, I met you like at an EngineersPEI event. So I feel like that would be the number one thing I would suggest going to, is definitely to make the connections on PEI anyways.
I know Marianne's on the council, but I had the exact same answer. So bring a friend and go to the events. It can be a lot of fun too.
Yep.
And there's always food too.
Yeah, I would say any associations or student type stuff. I was the president of the Engineering Society, and that was one of the reasons I got recruited to go to Procter & Gamble out of the university, because I was seen as a leader. Even I was not making great marks, but I was a leader, I guess, and I was social. And the more people you can get to know and understand their background, it's a small world. And if you can leave a good impression with someone, it'd be surprising how quickly that will come back around. So with good intention, of course. So.
Thank you. The next question we have in the chat here are, what are some of the core fundamentals learned from experience in the sustainability field, and what would be the way forward for a person keen on sustainability?
I think for sustainability, like currently I do a lot of work in greenhouse gas emissions, but I wouldn't say that's necessarily a requirement to know that. I know, like you learn in the program that sustainability is really, really broad. It encompasses a lot. So it's kind of a difficult topic to talk about, but I think just the fundamentals of sustainability are that it needs to be economical, social, and environmentally friendly. And that's really the core of sustainability, and it's kind of ingrained in everything I do. And sometimes it's kind of hard to connect the dots between those three pillars, but yeah, understanding the pillars and kind of how to use them, I would say would be a good thing to know.
For the last question, I just have one other thing I just thought of for the networking question. Once you're out in the world, so even if you're outside of PEI, if you see someone with the pinky ring, there's your icebreaker. So you can walk up to them and be like, oh, what discipline are you? And then that's kind of like I've done that to a bunch of people, like on airplanes or all over, just to strike up a conversation. So they might not be practicing now, but odds are like they could be. So like that's also a good like little icebreaker networking opportunity as well.
Thank you, Marianne, and thank you for the answers for the previous question. The next question we have in the chat, are there any high demand certifications that are required going into the field?
The thing with certifications, I find if you take like an online course and everything and you're certified in something, unless it's practiced out in the actual real world in business, or it's fine. It's sort of like, yeah, I know anytime you can learn about lean in general, waste, how to reduce waste in a company or a business, you can get a certification for that, but until you're practiced and employ it into the business, it doesn't mean anything. It's like buying a set of tools but never really having used them. So it's a mixed question for me, because I think just having a certification doesn't get you necessarily, but I think, yeah, I don't know. I did a terrible job answering that, but I'm trying to say is just get out and do your best job, and along the way be curious about things as you go along. And if there's a certification that fits what you're doing and you can use it in your job and show that how to use the tools, because yeah, I think it's fun to learn about new things, but maybe get on the job and then get the certification. So
Yeah, I would say something similar. Like, I think getting out and doing something might be a better use of your time than online certifications. You can volunteer, for example, with Habitat for Humanity and learn about how a house is built, how to frame it, how to put a roof on, how to install windows, how to put on siding, all that stuff. And that's just one example. But you can pretty easily volunteer at lots of spots and gain a lot of valuable experience. And that might be a better use of your time than certifications. And it's probably something that an employer would look at quite favorable too.
Yeah, I totally agree, Jordan, and getting involved in your community in whatever way. So.
And most of the times, if you wait until you're already employed, they will pay for the certifications. And then once you're in a job, if you're looking for a change, and then once you're searching like job ads, and then you see, oh, they're all asking for this, or they're all asking for your project management certification, then like maybe that's then something you branch out if you want to go in that direction. But going into the field, there isn't really a certification that's better than the other, because then each company is going to be so different and want different things.
It's hard too, because you could take a SolidWorks certification or something, and then when you get out in the field, you don't even end up using SolidWorks. So it really depends. So I think that's a good point, to wait until you get into the field first.
Thank you all. Just since questions are starting to dry up and we're coming to the end of the evening, I'm just going to ask for each of you to provide some final words, just anything you feel you might want to mention to all these students before we part.
I guess enjoy the journey and don't rush along the way. You're young in your career, and it feels like you can't go fast enough. Just enjoy and learn and be curious along the way, and look for those opportunities that make you want to get up in the morning and even work 7/24 and go flat out earlier on in your career. So just find those things.
Yeah, I would, aside from what I've already said, I would take time for yourself too. I know you're very busy at school, and sometimes an engineering career can be pretty busy as well. But it's really important to take time to yourself and to be creative. Like Brian mentioned, we have kind of two sides of our brain, and I find as engineers, we work one side a lot more than the other. I think being creative, whether it's art or through music, can be really valuable and kind of a good way to get away from work for a bit.
Yeah, and then I'd say don't wish away school to be over, because it's only 4 to 5 years of your life, and then working will be 20 and upwards years, and you'll be missing those university days for sure. And I hope to see some of you guys at the Design Expo, and if it's virtual, I'll call in and check up on all the projects and see the cool stuff you guys are working on.
Thank you all. So just before we conclude, just some closing remarks here. Thank you to everyone in attendance, especially the speakers. It is much appreciated having you come and talk to the students. I appreciate it very much. Thank you again to EngineersPEI for sponsoring this event and just for their continuous support of our program. They're always there in every aspect of it. Congratulations and thank you to those who completed all of the components of the professionalization micro-credential. That the industry night was part of that credential as well. It's just available to all students. But just a quick highlight to Godswill and Matthew. You both completed everything in time for tonight, so great job to you both. Just a quick plug for the experiential education. They're a great supporter as well, as they helped put on the professionalization cohort. You can always book an appointment with them to practice your interview skills or send in a resume or cover letter in time for the summer if you're planning on working. Just one last plug for the evening will be for the Success Center, as I am a Success Center associate. We are open for the semester now. As you can see here, we have our winter hours. We are virtual. We're all online this year. So I took a picture of what we have on Moodle. You can chat with us in real time using Tidio during our opening hours, or you can send us an email at any point and we'll get back to you and we can figure out how to meet up. So we'll always be here for any of your 3D printing needs or just virtual tutoring with your courses you have. We would also appreciate if any students could email us about what you want to see this semester. We have a couple ideas of what we're going to be running, but we always appreciate your input because it is you that we are trying to help. So after this, make sure you check out our YouTube or our Instagram. We'll be putting up some pictures and as well as this whole session on there. So just thank you to everyone who came out. Thank you to Marianne, Brian, and Jordan. It was great. Lots of wisdom coming from you. Ooh. And that's all we have for this evening. So thank you to everyone in attendance.
Great. Thanks, Barry. Thanks, Libby.